this presentation, I will be talking about my current research project, which focuses on name choices in families, and more specifically on surnames, family practices, and identity formation. I am working on a 2-year research project, which is supported by the Danish Carlsberg Foundation. And right now I'm approximately halfway into the project. And some of the time I have spent at the University of Copenhagen and some at the University of California, Berkeley. So the main question that I'm trying to answer is, which functions do surnames serve in family practices and identity formation, specifically focusing on Denmark? So one of the biggest societal changes, at least in Denmark, in the past 5 decades, has been the change in family forms and structures, including gender norms. And I'm thinking that the use of surnames in families must reflect this development. Just 4 decades ago, until 1981, Danish women automatically got their husband's surname when they got married. And since then, a lot has happened in the Danish name law and in society in general. And now 25% of surname changes are done by men. And also it has become possible in Denmark for unmarried couple and same-sex couples to share a surname, and for people who have gotten divorced to pass on a former spouse's surname to a new partner, and so on. So these numbers from Statistics Denmark, they show that in 2020, more than 11,000 men changed their surname. And around 34,000 women did the same. In Denmark, almost half of the population has a surname ending in søn, like Hansen, Jensen, Nielsen, Petersen, and so on. But more and more people are getting rid of these very common surnames. For example, when they get married, and then they're taking less common surnames instead. So the numbers on this slide shows that most people went from a søn surname to a non-søn surname when they changed their name, or from one non-søn surname to another non-søn surname. So this trend is reflected in the data that I have for this research project. But also there are some indications that some people are not following this trend, but going against it instead. So how about other Western countries? Well, a French study from 2001 focused on married women's surnames in the European Union. And the article that I'm referring to here starts by asking, how many people in France are aware that married women are not legally required to take on their husband's surname? And I think that's a very interesting illustration of how much variation there is within Western countries in how surnames are used. So in this French study, EU countries were divided into groups regarding surname choices. And as you can see here, there is a lot of variation within the EU when it comes to how many women took their husband's surname. So for example, in countries like Germany, the UK, Austria, France, and so on, practically all married women took their husband's surname. Whereas in, for example, Belgium and Italy, this is not the case. So there is a lot of variation. Also, a study from the US from 2010 showed that 90% of married women took their husband's surname. So previous research on this subject has mostly focused on the significance of women's marital surname changes. And these studies are mostly from the US and the UK. And some studies have focused on negative attitudes toward married women's surname. So because the surname practices in the countries where most studies of this kind are made, they're more traditional than Danish surname practices. So these studies focus less on diversity of surname choices and its connection to doing family practices and forming identity. So it seems like it's so rare for men to take a woman's surname that this is not discussed very much. Also in news articles and other things like that that I've read about this, the question is, are women taking their husband's name or are they keeping their own? Like a man taking a woman's name seems to not even be an option in many cases, in many cultures. And I think this is very interesting when comparing to, for example, Danish culture. Okay, so what I'm doing is a qualitative study. And I have ended up interviewing 23 people. I've decided to limit the study to involve people from the Copenhagen area in Denmark, the capital area, who have started some kind of relationship or family within the past 10 years. So the participants are all between 29 and 54 years old, and most of them are in their 30s. And these different or 23 different people that I have talked to, they live in different kinds of families. So I have married women with children, couples with shared children, couples with children from previous relationships and shared children, married women without children, married men without children, single women with children from previous marriage, married women with children from previous marriage, and married women with children from previous marriage and shared children. And I have been doing semi-structured, in-depth interviews. I have done them in person and online and on the phone, and asked the participants all kinds of questions, both specifically about their names and also about family life, gender roles, and so on. Also, the ethical considerations have played a significant role in this project. So first of all, I have given a lot of thought to the question of anonymization. I have ended up deciding to anonymize the participants to protect their privacy, but this is of course a difficult decision when the project is actually about names. And I ended up deciding to anonymize the participants to protect their privacy. However, this does present some issues concerning the specific surnames of the participants, and it poses a dilemma. I mean, how much information will be lost if I'm not using the real names? Some of these dilemmas that I have had, I will share with you here. For example, one participant has a surname, which is the name of a specific animal. The person really likes this name and identifies with the animal. So how do I find a name that will contain the same meaning? Another participant has a surname which is strongly connected to a specific part of Denmark. Like, you know, when you hear this name, you know that the person who has this name must have some kind of connection to a specific location in Denmark. And a third participant has kept her ex-husband's surname because it's the name of a famous artist that she likes. And a fourth participant was happy to get rid of her old name when she got married because she shared that name with a famous politician that she didn't want to be associated with. So it's difficult um, to replace these specific names with something that would kind of have the same meaning. Okay, so it has turned out that the people that I've interviewed have made different surname choices. So 5 women have taken their partner's name and not the other way around. 2 men have taken their partner's name and not the other way around. So in 6 marriages, both parties have taken a name from their partner. And in 6 marriages, both parties have kept their original name. So what do these name choices actually say about these families? Well, surnames are definitely used as a way of creating a certain identity. And choosing surnames in a specific way is a way of doing a certain kind of family. Also positioning yourself in a certain way. David Morgan, a British sociologist, introduced a theory on family practices, which is a new way of viewing family life with a focus on doing instead of being. And choosing a specific surname is an action you perform. Also, Norbert Elias has talked about we identity and I identity. Arguing that first names help in signaling individuality and I identity, while surnames can signal we identity, as in we are a family. So my data show that I identity and we identity definitely play a role when choosing names in families. But some people also want to signal I identity, even though they are a part of a family. And some reasons for taking a partner's name are wanting a shared family identity, also that the partner has a more attractive name, and disliking own original name. So one woman who has taken her husband's name has said this: it's more about creating something together. That's the way it is in everything we do. Now we've become a family with 2 kids. We've celebrated Christmas at our own house. That whole thing about creating your own traditions and your own family. Of course, still with a connection to what we came from, but the way we live, I think, is very much based on the idea that the 4 of us belong together. And also a man that I have interviewed who is married to another man, he said, we thought it was important that we all had the same name so that it would be obvious that we were a small unit, despite the fact that we are a little bit of a different unit. And some reasons for keeping original name and not changing your name when getting married is wanting to hold on to connection to your own family, like your parents, your ancestors, not wanting to be associated with spouse's family. Some people have not the greatest relationship with their partner's family and don't want the same name. Wanting to hold on to own identity. Bad experiences with name change and divorce. This could both be your own experiences and also, for example, parents' experiences. And also being a feminist, never wanting to take a man's name. And one woman, she said about marriage, I don't think I've thought that it is necessarily forever. Maybe I don't quite have that romantic idea about it. So this is a woman who kept her own name and wouldn't take her husband's, and he didn't take hers. And another person said, it's not that I in any way predict that we'll get divorced or anything, but it does feel like now this is my name, and then it's not associated with all kinds of things. So some reasons for combining names, taking a name from each party in a couple. I wouldn't take his if he didn't take mine. And also feeling very connected to both families, wanting to take a name from both families and also bringing this on to your children, wanting to be a unit, wanting gender equality. So if she takes his, he also takes hers, and wanting to compromise. And also the surnames that I mentioned earlier that are very, very common in Denmark. I could see in my data that some people definitely want to get rid of them and move away from them, while others might actually feel different about it. So one way of looking at it is not feeling connected to your name because it is so frequent. So many people are called Jensen, for example, that you don't really feel like it's your name, and don't really feel a connection to it. And also being glad to be able to get rid of it and get a more special name when you get married. But then some people are actually liking the unpretentious Danish names like Jensen, Hansen. And some people who have gotten rid of their surnames wish they actually held on to them. They're kind of just getting tired of everybody wanting unique, special names, and they just feel like it would be better to hold on to the surnames. But some people, or one person said, I wouldn't have taken his name if it was Jensen or something like that. So, this quality of the name can actually make some people think, okay, then I don't want us to have the same name because I don't want a surname. And some perceptions of the connection between family practices and surname choices. Some examples of things that people have said are a woman, she took her husband's name and she views gender roles in the family as being fairly traditional. Another woman was saying that family identity was important to her, while her ex-husband was more individualistic. She took his name, but he wouldn't take hers. So she definitely had this perception of this connection between the way you do family and the choices you make about names. And a woman was saying that she and her husband are very equal when it comes to housework and daily chores, paternity leave, maternity leave, etc. She took his name because it was the best name, meaning it was the most beautiful name or something like that. A woman saying that she's a feminist and she would never take a man's name, but she still does most of the housework. So sometimes it doesn't necessarily kind of fit how you feel about names and how you feel about other practices in the family. So these are some results from the study, which is still going on. And if you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear them. And thank you so much for listening.
It was very thorough, and you must have been fascinated by some of the results. We'll wait for a minute to give people a chance for their comments or their questions. Gerrit has his hand raised. Gerrit, you want to unmute yourself.
Apologies. Thank you again for the nice presentation. I was wondering about, is this the new name that appears in your passport? Or is it a name that just used to address you by official instances? That's my first question. The
I
status
think
of the
that
name.
I don't think there's a distinction between the name in your passport and the name in like official records. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, it means that if you change your name, I think in the Netherlands you never lose your name at birth, unless you go to the court and change your name finally, and then it goes to your passport. But many women use the name of the husband unofficially, with friends and relatives and everywhere, and also the government can address you with the husband's name, but it's not in your passport.
Okay, that's not the way it is in Denmark. If you change your name, you change it everywhere. You don't hold on to your old name.
Okay, thank you. And then can you also choose an entirely new name then?
Yes, you can. There are some restrictions to which names you can choose. If you have a name that has appeared in your family a few generations ago, for example, you can choose that name, and some people do that too. I have talked to people also who have chosen a new name. I mean, in a way to create this family identity, which is not connected to either person's family. So this is something you can do as well. Yes.
And final question, if I'm allowed, the children, do they, is there a possibility also to choose for a double name, so the name of the both parents for the children?
Yes, and most people do that. Yes. So often it's a question of who gets to give the children the I mean, often they give one name is a middle name and one is a last name, but they actually kind of have the same function. But it's better to have your name as the last one of the two, because that's the name that will be used in official settings and so on. So I've also heard about people who have then chosen the father's last name as a middle name for the first child and the mother's as the last name, and then they have switched it for the second child because they both wanted the second place. And I mean, there are many different ways of doing this and combining the names, and some kids have 4 different names, last names or middle names, because the parents want all their names to appear in the child's name. So yeah, that's definitely something that people think about a lot, of doing this and getting both parents' names to the child. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is possible in France and in Belgium, and then it is about 10% of the parents who choose the double name for their children, but it's only 10% and not a majority.
Yeah.
So Denmark is different in this.
Yeah, and some people hyphenate the names so that they will be equal, so that they won't have one name which is officially a middle name and one which is the official surname. So they do this to make the names equal as well.
Thank you. You have a question from Amalia in the chat that I'll read you. Were the family name practices of the study participants, parents, grandparents, or immediate friend group examined for possible correlation to study participants' practices?
Yes, I have focused on that too, because yes, some people are they hold on to the tradition in their family and keep that going, and some people react against it. So that's a big part of how people choose if they want to do the same as their parents. Also, like I mentioned, people having experience with divorce might have some, the way that they think about names is affected by that. If, for example, if their parents have divorced and their mother has changed her name or something like that after the divorce, then they might have a different attitude towards taking a man's name, thinking maybe you will have to change it again. And yeah, so it's definitely a part of it, how the families have done this before. Yeah.
Thank you. Fascinating. Just before we click off, Richard, I hope you've looked at the chat. You have a note of appreciation from Marianne, who also asked you a question about toponyms. And I think that wraps up this very fine collection of papers on anthroponyms in many different cultural contexts. Fascinating the way they've come together into this panel.